December 7, 1941, 8:06 a.m. Ford Island, Pearl Harbor, territory of Hawaii. The air is already thick with smoke. Burning fuel slicks ripple across the harbor like black glass, igniting in sudden flashes as debris rains down. The water itself seems to be on fire. A battleship's hull, once pristine gray, lists hard to port, her superstructure twisted, her decks crawling with men who moments ago were eating breakfast. You can hear it before you fully understand it. The scream of diving engines, the deep hollow crump of armor-piercing bombs, the sharp metallic tearing sound of steel giving way. The USS Arizona is gone, split open, burning from the inside out. The USS Oklahoma rolls slowly, helplessly, trapping hundreds below decks. Sailors claw at oil-slicked steel, some praying, some screaming, some already silent. This is supposed to be decisive. From Tokyo's perspective, this morning is not just an attack, it is a calculation finally coming due. For years, Japanese naval planners have studied the American Pacific Fleet like surgeons studying a patient before an operation. They know the names of the battleships, they know their tonnage, their armor, their moorings. They know Pearl Harbor is the beating heart of American sea power west of California. Cripple the fleet here and the United States will need years to recover. That belief hangs heavy in the cockpits of the attacking pilots. It echoes in the command rooms aboard the carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Huryu. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto has wagered everything on this single violent morning, and by all visible measures it's working. Battleships are sinking at their berths. Aircraft burn wingtip to wingtip on the airfields. Anti-aircraft fire rises late, confused, uneven. For long minutes it feels like the Americans are frozen, shocked into helplessness. When the last Japanese aircraft turns for home, Pearl Harbor is a graveyard. But what the planners in Tokyo cannot see, what no reconnaissance photo will capture, is what begins after the smoke starts to thin. By mid-morning the fires are still burning, but something else is happening. Men are moving toward the wreckage. Divers, many of them barely trained for what they're about to face, slip into oil-dark water thick with fuel, debris, and human remains. They carry cutting torches and improvised tools. Some of them can hear tapping from inside overturned hulls. Some of them can't, and that's worse. At dry dock number 1, officers stare at the twisted remains of the battleship Nevada, beached to prevent her from sinking in the channel. Her hull is torn open, scorched, flooded. On paper, she should be written off. Instead, someone says, "We can save her." It sounds insane. The official damage reports arriving in Washington are catastrophic. 8 battleships damaged or sunk, over 2,400 Americans dead. The Pacific Fleet's battleship line, once the symbol of American naval prestige, lies shattered in a single morning. Japanese intelligence officers, reviewing initial assessments days later, reached the conclusion they were trained to reach. The Americans are finished for now. They estimate it will take at least 2 years to bring Pearl Harbor back to operational status. Maybe longer to rebuild the fleet. Maybe longer still to recover the will to fight. After all, shipbuilding is slow. Battleships take years to construct. Crews take time to train. Infrastructure takes time to repair. And time, the Japanese Empire believes, is something America will not be able to afford politically. But back in Hawaii, time is being treated very differently. At the Navy Yard, floodlights snap on as the sun sets. Welders work through the night. Pumps roar, forcing water out of compartments that were never meant to be dry again. Engineers sketch solutions directly onto steel plates with chalk. There are no speeches, no ceremonies, just work. The harbor becomes a machine that never sleeps. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz arrives days later to assume command of the Pacific Fleet. He toured the wreckage quietly, taking notes, asking questions. When aides suggest the damage is overwhelming, he cuts them off. The Japanese have made 3 mistakes, he says later. They didn't destroy the fuel tanks, they didn't destroy the dry docks, and they didn't destroy the submarine base. Those 3 facts change everything. Pearl Harbor is wounded, but its arteries are intact. Within weeks, ships once thought lost are being refloated. The California, the West Virginia, even the Nevada begins the slow process of resurrection. Harbor mud is dredged. Hulls are patched, entire sections of ship are rebuilt where they sank. To Japanese planners reading intercepted reports months later, the information sounds wrong. Ships sunk at Pearl Harbor are showing up in intelligence summaries again, not as wrecks, but as repair projects. And somewhere in Tokyo, a quiet doubt begins to form. What if Pearl Harbor wasn't the end of American sea power, but the beginning of something far larger? By the spring of 1942, Pearl Harbor no longer smells like defeat. The air still carries traces of burned fuel and scorched paint, but layered beneath it is something sharper: hot metal, fresh welds, ozone from cutting torches biting into steel. The harbor hums, pumps throb day and night. Cranes swing with mechanical patience, lifting armor plate where twisted wreckage once lay. From a distance, it looks impossible. From up close, it looks inevitable. Inside the capsized hull of the USS West Virginia, divers work in total darkness. The ship lies settled into the mud, her decks inverted, her interior a maze of flooded compartments. Every movement stirs clouds of silt. Every step risks disturbing something unspeakable. They find bodies, they mark locations, they keep working, because above them engineers have made a decision that defies pre-war naval thinking. These battleships will not be scrapped, they will be rebuilt. Not back in California, not in some distant yard. Here, now, dry dock number 1 becomes a resurrection chamber. When the Nevada is finally hauled inside, her hull is jagged, pitted, and burned. Japanese bomb damage is clearly visible, clean penetrations where armor-piercing rounds struck exactly as designed, yet the dry dock holds, the pumps work, the gates seal, and as water drains away inch by inch, the ship emerges from the harbor like something clawing its way back from the dead. You can almost feel the disbelief ripple through the dockworkers when her keel finally settles onto the blocks. She's still here. At Pearl Harbor Navy Yard, bureaucracy quietly dies. Civilian engineers and Navy officers stop arguing about procedure and start arguing about speed. Shipfitters cut away destroyed compartments and replace them with redesigned ones. Electrical systems are not just repaired, they are modernized. Anti-aircraft mounts are multiplied. Armor is reinforced based on hard lessons learned in fire and blood. This is not restoration, it's evolution. Back in Tokyo, the picture looks very different. Japanese intelligence officers pore over fragmentary reports, radio intercepts, aerial reconnaissance photos taken at extreme range. The Americans, according to doctrine, should still be digging out wreckage. Instead, analysts begin seeing unfamiliar silhouettes in the harbor. Ships they thought were gone, ships they thought would take years. A report crosses a desk in early 1942 noting that several damaged battleships have been reclassified from sunk to under repair. The language is careful, conservative, but the implication is explosive. Some officers dismiss it as American propaganda. Others argue the ships may be floating hulks, technically repaired, but combat ineffective. Still, the reports keep coming. And then comes the shock no one was prepared for. American aircraft carriers, not at Pearl Harbor during the attack, strike back far sooner than expected. Doolittle's raiders reach Tokyo in April 1942, launching from the USS Hornet. Militarily minor, psychologically devastating. If the Americans can do this, what else are they capable of? At Pearl Harbor, the pace accelerates. The harbor becomes a classroom where the US Navy learns how to fight a new kind of war. Salvage operations teach engineers how ships fail and how to prevent it next time. Damage control doctrines are rewritten, flooding procedures refined, fire suppression systems redesigned. Every mistake made on December 7th is catalogued and corrected. Meanwhile, the fuel storage tanks, left untouched by the Japanese attack, prove to be the unsung heroes of the entire operation. Millions of barrels of oil keep the Pacific Fleet alive. Ships don't have to return to the West Coast to refuel. They sortie, repair, and sortie again. The Japanese had gambled on knocking out American striking power. They had not realized they were feeding an industrial engine that thrived under pressure. By late 1942, something extraordinary becomes undeniable. The ships raised from Pearl Harbor are no longer just seaworthy. They are better than before. The West Virginia returns to service with enhanced armor, improved radar, and heavier anti-aircraft firepower. The California follows, the Tennessee, the Maryland. One by one, names once spoken in funerals begin appearing in operational briefings. Japanese planners studying the order of battle feel something unfamiliar creeping in: uncertainty. They had calculated American recovery based on peacetime assumptions, slow construction, political hesitation, public fatigue. What they failed to account for was a nation that treated catastrophe as permission to ignore limits. The harbor that was supposed to be a tomb has become a forge. And it's not just repairing ships, it's training crews. Sailors rotate through Pearl Harbor learning damage control drills born from real wreckage. They practice sealing compartments, counter-flooding, fighting fires in smoke-choked steel corridors. Lessons learned from drowned ships are passed to living ones. Every repaired battleship carries the memory of December 7th inside its hull. Every crew knows exactly what happens if they fail. Somewhere in the Japanese Naval General Staff, an officer finally voices what many have been thinking but few dared to say aloud. If Pearl Harbor is operational again this quickly, he asks quietly, what does that mean for the rest of the war? No one answers, because the next realization is worse. Pearl Harbor wasn't just being repaired. It was becoming the most heavily fortified, most experienced, and most efficient naval base the Pacific had ever seen. And by the time Japan truly understands what that means, the American fleet will already be sailing west. July 1942, Tokyo, Naval General Staff Headquarters. Aerial photographs are spread across a long table, weighted at the corners by coffee cups and brass paperweights. The images are grainy, taken at extreme range by reconnaissance aircraft flying at the edge of their endurance. Shadows blur details. Angles deceive, but the shapes are unmistakable. Dry docks active, piers crowded, ships moving. Rear Admiral Fukudome Shidru studies the photographs longer than most. He knows Pearl Harbor, he helped plan its destruction. He knows exactly how long battleship repairs are supposed to take. These timelines don't make sense. Intelligence officers begin stacking reports, trying to reconcile doctrine with reality. One document estimates that American repair capacity has been exaggerated by enemy propaganda. Another suggests the ships may be technically afloat but tactically irrelevant. Then a third report lands on the table. The USS Nevada, previously confirmed damaged and grounded, has completed sea trials. The room goes quiet. You can almost feel the tension tighten, the mental recalculations happening in real time. Because sea trials mean engines, they mean guns, they mean crews, they mean readiness. Japanese naval planning had always relied on asymmetry, superior training, superior torpedoes, decisive early blows. The idea was never to outbuild America. It was to stun her, force negotiation before industry could tilt the balance. Pearl Harbor was the stun. But what if the blow hadn't landed the way they believed? At sea, the consequences are already unfolding. American task forces built around carriers, cruisers, and destroyers are moving with growing confidence. Midway has just happened. 4 Japanese carriers lie at the bottom of the Pacific. The psychological impact is enormous, but the logistical implications are worse. Every Japanese loss now feels heavier. Because somewhere behind the American fleet is Pearl Harbor, fully alive, fully supplied, fully furious. At the harbor itself, the transformation is almost complete. Dry docks cycle ships in and out with factory-like precision. Radar towers rise where none existed before. Anti-aircraft batteries bristle along the shoreline. Submarine pens expand. Fuel lines are reinforced. Communication hubs multiply. Pearl Harbor has stopped being a target. It has become a launch pad. Sailors arriving fresh from the mainland stare in disbelief at the ships around them. These aren't museum pieces dragged back from the dead. They're modernized warships, their silhouettes altered by new gun mounts and radar arrays. The past is still visible if you know where to look, patches of new steel where bombs once struck, but the future dominates the view. For Japanese intelligence, this creates a nightmare scenario. The Americans are not replacing their fleet slowly, they are compounding it. Each repaired ship frees dock space for the next. Each lesson learned increases survivability. Each sortie sharpens crews who now carry combat experience from Coral Sea, Midway, and Guadalcanal. By late 1942, analysts quietly revised their estimates. The Americans will not need 2 years to recover, they will need less than 1. And worse still, shipyards on the west coast are delivering new vessels at a pace no naval staff had ever seen. Essex-class carriers, Fletcher-class destroyers, transports, oilers, an entire ocean-spanning ecosystem of war. Pearl Harbor is the nerve center tying it all together. Rear Admiral Fukudome circles one photograph with a pencil. It shows a battleship easing away from a pier under her own power, tugs guiding her bow. He writes a single word beside it: impossible. But the ocean doesn't care what planners think is possible. In early 1943, Japanese submarines report increased American activity across the Central Pacific. Convoys appear where none existed months earlier. Patrol patterns tighten, response times shrink. The Americans are no longer reacting, they are preparing, and Pearl Harbor, once assumed crippled, is feeding the momentum. For the first time since the war began, a terrifying thought crystallizes inside the Japanese Naval General Staff. What if Pearl Harbor didn't buy Japan time? What if it gave America clarity? Because the fleet rising from that harbor is not the one Japan planned to fight. It is larger, harder, smarter, and it is learning how to come west, island by island, without ever needing to stop. January 1943, Truk Lagoon, Imperial Japanese Navy Combined Fleet anchorage. The water is calm, deceptively so. From the decks of the battleships and carriers anchored in the lagoon, the war still feels distant, measured in maps, dispatches, and fuel tallies rather than explosions. Officers gather in wardrooms, unfolding charts marking American movements with grease pencils. But something is wrong with the numbers. Every new report from the Central and South Pacific adds ships to the American side of the ledger, not replacements. Additions. Rear Admiral Yugaki Matome stares at the figures longer than he should. He knows naval warfare is ultimately arithmetic: ships, fuel, trained crews, distance. Japan's entire strategy has been built around controlling that arithmetic through early advantage, yet the equations are changing. American task forces are appearing faster than expected. They are staying at sea longer. They are returning from battle not depleted but reinforced. The reason traces back again and again to one place: Pearl Harbor. By now, the harbor is no longer discussed as a wounded base. It's discussed as a fixed constant, an immovable force in the Pacific War. Ships damaged in action at Guadalcanal are limping back there, not to California. Crews are rotated, repaired, retrained, and sent forward again in weeks, not months. The Japanese logistical system, stretched thin across vast distances, cannot match this rhythm. Fuel becomes a quiet obsession. Every sortie is weighed against reserves. Tanker losses hurt more than ship losses. The Americans, by contrast, operate under a different assumption. Fuel will be there. At Pearl Harbor, fuel is everywhere. The storage tanks the Japanese left untouched now supply an ever-expanding fleet. Oilers move like blood cells, feeding task forces at sea. Ships refuel without breaking formation. Operations that once seemed reckless become routine. This changes how Americans fight. They push farther, stay longer, strike harder. In Tokyo, the Naval General Staff begins to use a phrase that would have been unthinkable a year earlier: fleet inferiority. It appears first in internal memoranda, then in whispered conversations, then finally in formal assessments. Japan's shipbuilding capacity cannot replace losses at the rate the war now demands. Skilled pilots are dying faster than they can be trained. Experienced mechanics, gunners, and deck crews are irreplaceable. Meanwhile, American sailors rotate through Pearl Harbor like a living conveyor belt of experience. Combat veterans teach newcomers. Damage control drills are conducted by men who have watched ships sink and rise again. The psychological shift is just as profound. For American crews, Pearl Harbor becomes proof of resilience. Every ship that returns to the fight carries a story of survival. December 7th is no longer a wound, it's a vow. For Japanese officers, Pearl Harbor becomes something else entirely. A miscalculation. They had assumed destruction would paralyze America. Instead, it unified her. By mid-1943, American fleets are assembling on a scale that defies pre-war logic. Amphibious task forces rehearse landings. Carrier groups practice coordinated strikes. Battleships once written off as wrecks now provide shore bombardment, their guns roaring again, this time pointed west. Japanese reconnaissance photographs show lines of ships stretching beyond the frame. No single ship is decisive anymore. The system is, and the system runs through Pearl Harbor. An officer at Combined Fleet Headquarters voices the fear aloud during a planning session. Even if we win the next battle, he says carefully, they will return, and when they do, there will be more of them. No one argues because they've all seen the reports. They know what Pearl Harbor has become. And they know the final truth is closing in. The harbor that was meant to end American resistance has instead made American defeat mathematically impossible. What remains is only a question of time, and time now belongs to the United States. Late 1943, Pearl Harbor. From the air, the harbor no longer resembles the place photographed in December 1941. The scars are still there if you know where to look, but they've been buried under movement, steel, and scale. Piers are packed end to end. Carriers dominate the horizon, their flat decks casting long shadows across the water. Battleships reborn, rearmed, reconfigured, sit low and powerful at their moorings. Destroyers dart between them like muscle and nerve, never still. This is not a recovering fleet, this is an overwhelming one. Admiral Chester Nimitz stands on a pier watching another task force depart. The choreography is precise. Tugs guide hulls outward. Signal flags snap in the wind. Engines rumble, then settle into a deep, confident rhythm. Each ship carries fuel, ammunition, trained crews, and something harder to quantify: momentum. Every vessel leaving Pearl Harbor represents a failure of Japanese prediction. Every wake trailing behind them is proof that December 7th did not achieve what it was meant to. Japanese naval observers, receiving delayed intelligence reports, struggle to describe what they're seeing. Words like unexpected and surprising no longer suffice. The scale defies their models. It's not just that America rebuilt faster than expected, it's that America expanded while rebuilding. Ships raised from the harbor now sail alongside brand new hulls straight from the mainland. Old and new fight together, unified by doctrine refined through bloodshed, radar-directed gunfire, coordinated carrier strikes, integrated air-sea operations. Pearl Harbor has become the crucible where this doctrine is tested, refined, and unleashed. For Japanese officers, the realization arrives quietly, but it lands like a verdict. Even a perfect battle would no longer be enough. The Americans do not need a single decisive victory. They can afford mistakes, losses, learning curves, because behind every engagement is an industrial and logistical engine that resets the board again and again. Pearl Harbor ensures that no American defeat is permanent. At sea, the consequences are relentless. Island chains once thought defensible are bypassed. Japanese garrisons are isolated, starved of resupply. American fleets appear where Japanese planners thought geography would protect them. The war begins to feel asymmetrical in a way no one anticipated. Not skill versus skill, system versus system. And the American system is now running at full speed. In Tokyo, some officers privately acknowledge what they cannot say publicly. The war's outcome is no longer a matter of if, but when. Pearl Harbor, the opening move meant to secure victory, has instead accelerated defeat. It hardened American resolve, it forced innovation, it erased complacency, and worst of all, it removed uncertainty from American planning. They now know they can recover from anything. As another fleet clears the harbor mouth, the sun glints off radar arrays, gun barrels, flight decks, steel reborn, multiplied and aimed west. The water closes behind them, calm again. Pearl Harbor does not rest, it simply prepares the next wave. And somewhere far across the Pacific, Japanese commanders will soon face fleets that should not have existed, built from wreckage, powered by relentless industry, and driven by the memory of a morning that was supposed to end the war. Instead, it ensured how it would be won.